This 17-year-old slept at a friend's, but when Mom called in the morning, his voice sounded strange. Cody Dietz had not returned home from a sleepover, and he wasn't even picking his phone up. It was not unusual for Cody to go for a sleepover, but it was very odd for him to stay out so late. His mom, Bonnie, was starting to panic, but to her relief, the phone rang. It was Cody's friends. Relief quickly turned to horror when all they heard was a gurgling sound. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, we cover the surprising turn of events for a 17-year-old after a sleepover at a friend. Before we dive into the story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click on that little bell so you won't miss any of our stories, because we have a lot more content planned similar to this. It was 2008, and Cody was a regular 17-year-old who lived with his mom, dad, and sister in York, Pennsylvania. Like any other teenager, Cody loved to hang out with his friends and go for the occasional sleepover. But when Cody set out for some drinks and a sleepover with his friends on that fateful day, he and his family had yet to realize that their lives were going to change forever. When Cody didn't return home, his mom, Bonnie, tried calling him again and again, but Cody wasn't picking up. Bonnie's motherly instincts were telling her that something was wrong. Cody never stayed out this late, and why couldn't he pick up the phone? His parents began to panic. They were, for a moment, relieved when Cody's friends called his dad, but all hope was lost when the friend held the phone up to Cody. All they could hear was a gurgling noise. The friend told them that Cody was mumbling unintelligibly and he couldn't even stand up. With their fears worsening by the second, Cody's parents immediately knew that something was very wrong with their son. They called 911 and the paramedics arrived. They suspected that Cody had suffered a stroke and they rushed him to the nearby York hospital. Their suspicions were confirmed. 17-year-old Cody had suffered a severe stroke on the left side of his brain. His condition was declared critical to the extent he was immediately transferred by helicopter to the Penn State's Milton S. Hershey Medical Center. There, Dr. Ray Reichwein examined him. He was extremely concerned about Cody's condition and was worried about the impact of the delay in diagnosing his condition. The timeline of the diagnosis is key. Many of the therapies have the best outcome when done within 6 hours. Cody's delay in diagnosis was close to 12 hours, Dr. Reichwein told Penn Live later in 2012. Cody's family was devastated. The MRT scan showed the severity of the stroke on the left side of his brain, and it seemed that he had only a 20% chance of survival. Cody was dancing on the thin lines of life and death. Too much time had been wasted in diagnosing Cody's condition, and while bringing him in and changing hospitals. This delay meant that many of the treatments doctors usually applied to stroke victims were off limits, and Cody had to undergo a complex emergency surgery. The doctors would have to remove the top of his skull and stretch the lining over his brain to relieve the pressure on his brain. If not, Cody would not survive. The doctors began the strenuous process of trying to save Cody's life. They started with therapeutic hypothermia, which included lowering his body temperature to 33 degrees Celsius. This was a procedure used for patients undergoing open heart surgery or brain surgery. The cooling reduces the brain's oxygen consumption and prevents brain cells from dying while also decreasing inflammation in the skull. According to Dr. Reichwein, Cody had lots of brain swelling and no place for it to go. His type of stroke carries an 80% chance of death. In Cody's case, given the delay and severity, he surely would not have lived without further intervention. The process still did not guarantee Cody's survival, although it managed to stop the swelling. Cody spent 3 weeks in an induced coma. As a mother, Bonnie was tormented. She told Penn Live that while the hours dragged on, as she sat by the bedside, she did not know if she was going to lose her son. Everyone was in a harrowing state of uncertainty for those 3 weeks. Friends and family came together to pray for young Cody's life. He had so much of his life ahead of him, and leaving now would be a heartbreaking tragedy. Bonnie kept her son company throughout those long days. Her mind started going back to the past few weeks when her son was alive and well, or so she had thought. It dawned on her that Cody had been showing symptoms weeks before he suffered this terrible stroke. She remembered how Cody had been speaking slowly, with slurred words, and how his limbs had a constant tremble. Bonnie was aghast as she began to realize that she had ignored the vital symptoms that could have saved her son's life. This is the biggest danger of stroke, even in older people. It's difficult to identify the symptoms beforehand because they seem like commonplace aches. The problem only gets worse with younger people, since strokes are usually associated with affecting the elderly. That is probably why, although Bonnie noticed the oddities, she would have never imagined that her teenage son was about to have a stroke. And it was also why when Cody didn't wake up in the morning after the party, his friends thought he had a hangover and let him to sleep. However, contrary to the common beliefs, the National Center for Health Statistics states that strokes are one of the top 10 killers among children. What's more, doctors believe that the increase of strokes among younger people may be caused by unhealthy lifestyles, something which almost every teen is guilty of. Dr. Reichwein further stated that things like obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, smoking, and a more sedentary lifestyle are becoming more common in kids, and those factors carry a significant risk for a stroke. Adding insult to injury, teens often have no idea how their lifestyle choices can affect their health. For instance, drinking, smoking, taking birth control pills, and marijuana use can put all young people at an increased risk of having a stroke. Kathy Morrison from Hershey's stroke program told Penn Live that teens think they are indestructible. They also believe that stroke is only for old people, so teenage stroke isn't even on their radar screen. The issue is that most of them figure out that they're not so immortal only in the hard way, and by that time, it could have been too late, since the damage may already be done, and Cody's parents prayed that they weren't too late. Finally, the doctors revived Cody from the coma, but Cody was still very much far off from recovery. The damage from the stroke was extensive. The right side of Cody's body was paralyzed, and he could no longer speak or write. The doctors revealed that rehabilitation would take a very long time, and even then, full recovery could not be expected. But then, Cody's life took another turn, but this time for the better. Just 4 weeks after his stroke, he managed to speak. His first words were to tell his mom that he loved her, and Bonnie was drowning in tears of joy. Being able to speak so early on was a massive milestone for Cody, and it gave everyone hope for his recovery. After being released from the hospital, Cody went straight into 2 years of intensive rehabilitation. He was put through a range of therapies to help him to learn walking, writing, and eating once again. The journey was tough, but extremely rewarding. 2 years after his stroke, Cody was back to perfect health. Cody then shared his story as a young stroke survivor. "I wish I would have gone to a doctor before my stroke, but who knew?" Cody told Penn Live. Then, along with his mom, he took on the responsibility of spreading awareness on teen stroke within the community. They educated both teens and parents to be vigilant about the warning signs of an oncoming stroke. The symptoms include, but are not limited to, a feeling of faintness, arm weakness, facial paralysis, slurred speech, and vision problems. When teens and their parents are more aware of the risks and can identify the symptoms, hopefully strokes can be prevented or at least dealt with before it's too late. Robin Petrus, Executive Director of the Central Pennsylvania Aphasia Center in Danville, noted that when someone is young, they don't necessarily recognize the symptoms of a stroke, especially if they come and go. Bonnie, however, warned parents about the risks of stroke, stating that, "My advice to parents is, don't ignore any signs your kid may have." She knows all too well about those little slip-ups that can cost you your child's life. Who would have thought that a 17-year-old would suffer a stroke after a night of partying? For more extraordinary stories like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to hit that like button as well. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.